The music stopped first. Not faded, stopped. Like someone had pressed a finger against the pulse of the room. 100 conversations collapsed into a stunned silence as the heavy cathedral doors groaned open. Heads turned, then stayed turned. She stepped inside. Gold. Not glittering, not gaudy, but molten, like light had decided to take human form. The gown moved with her, each step controlled, unhurried, deliberate. No stylist could have constructed it. No boutique could have priced it. It had been made by hands that understood survival. A whisper floated from the second row. "Is that Lena?" At the altar, Victor Hale forgot how to breathe. His smile, the one perfected for magazine features and investor galas, slipped clean off his face. Beside Lena walked a tall man in a dark suit, his posture relaxed, almost indifferent to the shock rippling through the hall. When a draft slipped through the open doors and brushed her bare shoulders, he quietly removed his jacket and placed it around her. Protective, instinctive, not performative. Someone near the aisle inhaled sharply. "Wait, that's Rowan Cole." Another voice, trembling. "The Rowan Cole?" The bride's fingers tightened around her bouquet until the stems bent. Victor swallowed hard. "Lena," he whispered, though she was still 20 steps away. She did not hurry. She had hurried enough in her life. When she finally lifted her eyes to meet his, there was no anger in them. And somehow, that terrified him more. 8 years earlier, Lena Morrow owned exactly 3 things of value: a second-hand sewing machine, a cedar box filled with her grandmother's tailoring tools, and a belief, stubborn and glowing, that love was supposed to feel like shelter. If this opening already has your heart racing, take a second to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us we're never as alone as we think. Back then, her shop sat wedged between a bakery and a locksmith on a quiet Philadelphia street. The sign above the window simply read, "Alterations." Nothing fancy, but inside, magic happened daily. She hemmed prom dresses for girls who spun in front of the mirror until they got dizzy. She repaired suits for men who nervously practiced proposals under their breath. Once, she rebuilt an entire wedding gown after an airline lost the original. The bride cried into Lena's shoulder afterward. "You saved my day." Lena had smiled softly. "No, you just needed someone who cared." She believed caring was a kind of currency. Then Victor walked in. He carried himself like a man accustomed to doors opening before he touched them. Tall, polished, his voice smooth enough to make strangers feel chosen within minutes. He placed a charcoal suit on the counter. "Can you fix this by tomorrow?" She examined the torn seam. "I can try. I have an investor dinner," he said. "Very important." She worked late that night, humming under her breath while the machine clicked steadily. When he returned the next day and tried it on, his eyebrows lifted. "Perfect," he said. "Most people promise excellence. You deliver it." She laughed lightly. "It's just stitching." "No," he replied, studying her. "It's pride." He asked her to dinner before she realized what was happening. Victor had a way of making decisions feel mutual even when they weren't. Their first date stretched into 4 hours. He spoke about buildings he planned to raise, neighborhoods he intended to transform. "You think big," she said. "You think small," he countered gently. "But that's not a flaw. It's charming." She didn't notice the sting tucked inside the compliment. When he walked her home, he said, "You shouldn't stay in that little shop forever. You're meant for more." No one had ever said that to her. Not like that. Within 8 months, they were married in a courthouse ceremony that felt intimate and dizzying all at once. He slipped a diamond onto her finger that cost more than her yearly rent. "You don't have to struggle anymore," he told her. At first, it sounded like love. The penthouse came next, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble counters so pristine she hesitated to set a glass down. "Quit the shop," Victor suggested one evening, loosening his tie. "It's exhausting watching you work so hard for so little." "But I love it." "You'll love resting more." She kept the shop. For a while, the corrections started subtly. At dinner with his colleagues, She mispronounced a French wine. Victor chuckled softly. It's actually, he corrected, drawing out the proper pronunciation. The table laughed. Her cheeks warmed. Later, she whispered, you could have told me privately. Olena, he said, kissing her forehead. Don't be so sensitive. Another night, she reached for a yellow dress. He frowned. That color cheapens you. We're the navy. She changed. It felt easier. When she excitedly showed him sketches for a clothing line she dreamed of launching someday, he flipped through them quickly. You're talented, he admitted. But dreams don't scale. Real estate scales. She closed the notebook. The twins arrived 2 years later. Maya first, screaming with indignation, and Lila seconds behind, quieter but watchful. Lena thought motherhood might soften Victor. Instead, something in him hardened. The crying is relentless, he muttered one night, pulling a pillow over his head. They're babies. They're expensive, he replied. He began staying out later, traveling more. His phone face down at dinner. One afternoon, she mentioned reopening the shop part-time. He didn't look up from his laptop. That phase of your life is over. It's part of who I am. Was, he corrected. The word landed heavier than he intended, or maybe exactly as heavy as he intended. She sold her sewing machine 3 months later. Told herself it was temporary. Years slipped. Victor grew sharper, more impatient. If it weren't for me, he said once during an argument about grocery spending, you'd still be measuring hems for teenagers. The sentence echoed long after the fight ended. Then came the night Lena understood that love had quietly vacated her marriage. She had found an old sketchbook while unpacking storage boxes, drawings bursting with color, ambition stitched into every line. Hope. She stayed up revising them, heart fluttering with something she hadn't felt in years. When Victor came home, slightly unsteady from whiskey, she showed him. I was thinking maybe I could start small. Online, even. He stared at the pages. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough. Before she could react, he walked to the fireplace. Victor. The first page curled as flame kissed the corner. Victor, stop. He dropped the book in. You're a mother now, he said calmly. Grow up. The twins stirred down the hall. Something inside Lena, something buried, bruised, patient, opened its eyes. That night, after the house fell silent, she packed a diaper bag. 2 blankets. Birth certificates. $42 she had hidden inside an old lotion bottle. She removed her wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen counter. For a moment, she stood there, staring at it. 5 years of her life reduced to a circle of metal. Rain greeted her when she stepped outside. Cold. Immediate. Real. Freedom rarely announces itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives disguised as terror. She buckled the twins into the back seat of a borrowed car, her hands trembling so hard the keys rattled. As she drove away, Maya whimpered. It's okay, Lena whispered, though she wasn't sure it was. She didn't look back. If you've ever walked away from something that was breaking you, tell us in the comments with a simple, I chose myself. Someone reading it might find the courage they need tonight. The apartment she found weeks later smelled faintly of old paint and radiator heat. The couch sagged. The neighbors argued loudly, but the lock on the door was hers. The first months blurred into survival. She stitched again, borrowing a machine, taking small jobs, working while the twins slept curled beside her on folded blankets. One night, exhaustion dragged her under mid-stitch. The needle snapped. She stared at the broken metal and burst into tears so sudden they scared her. I can't do this, she whispered into the empty room. But morning came anyway. It always does. 3 years passed before Victor finalized the divorce. The support he provided barely covered daycare. He called it fairness. She called it freedom. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, a stranger rushed into her tiny workspace, clutching a torn emerald gown. Please tell me you can fix this. The gala is tonight. Lena examined the damage. Catastrophic. Yes, she said quietly. Leave it with me. She rebuilt the dress from the inside out, fingers flying with a certainty she thought she'd lost forever. When the woman returned and stepped into it, she froze before the mirror. Oh my God! Tears. Again, tears. But these felt different. Word spread. Slowly. Steadily. And for the first time since walking into the rain, Lena allowed herself a dangerous thought. Maybe her life wasn't over. Maybe it was beginning again. The calls didn't flood in overnight. There was no sudden montage of success, no viral moment, no miracle investor knocking on her door. Just one satisfied client telling another, and then another, until Lena realized something unfamiliar was happening inside her chest again. Anticipation. One late evening, after delivering a reconstructed bridesmaid dress, she returned home to find Maya and Lila asleep on the couch, their homework spread across the cushions like fallen leaves. The babysitter whispered, "They tried to stay awake for you." Lena knelt beside them, brushing curls from their foreheads. "I'm building something for us," she murmured. She wasn't sure if she was promising them, or herself. The next morning, while she wrestled with a stubborn zipper, the bell above her studio door chimed. She almost called out, "Be right there," but the words caught in her throat when she looked up. The man standing there didn't look important. No flashy watch. No aggressive cologne announcing his presence before he spoke. Just a simple dark coat and the kind of stillness that made the room feel quieter. "I was told you're the person who fixes things other people give up on." His voice was calm, measured. She wiped her hands on a cloth. "What needs fixing?" He laid a suit across the table. "The sleeve is off by half an inch. Everyone else says it's unnoticeable." She studied the stitching. "It is," she agreed. He nodded once. "But you noticed." A tiny smile pulled at her lips. "What's the occasion?" "My sister's foundation dinner. I'll have it ready tomorrow." He hesitated, then asked, "Why undercharge?" She blinked. "Excuse me. You quoted me less than anyone else." Lena shrugged lightly. People deserve beautiful things, even if they can't always afford perfection. He watched her a moment longer than most clients did. Not invasive, not appraising, just observant. "My name is Rowan," he said finally. "Lena." He returned the next day, tried on the jacket, rolled his shoulders once, then twice. "Perfect fit." "Most people rush," he said. "You don't." She almost laughed. "If I rushed, it would show." He reached for his wallet, but paused. "Have you always done this?" "Since I was 16. You never wanted something bigger?" She met his gaze steadily. "This is big. I build confidence people walk into rooms with." Something shifted in his expression then. Approval, maybe, or respect. After that, Rowan started appearing every few weeks. Sometimes with a minor repair. Sometimes with nothing urgent at all. Once, he brought 3 coats belonging to employees. Another time, he recommended her to someone hosting a charity auction. He never lingered too long. Never crossed the invisible line Lena had drawn around her carefully rebuilt life. But his presence felt easy. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the windows, he found her struggling to carry a bolt of heavy fabric. Without a word, he took the other end. "You don't have to prove you can do everything alone," he said quietly. She froze. The sentence brushed against an old wound. "I'm not proving anything," she replied. "Then why does it look like you never stop bracing for impact?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know how to explain that once you've lived inside a storm long enough, calm feels suspicious. Weeks later, the twins burst into the studio after school. "Mama, Mama, look." Lila held up a test paper marked with a bright red A. Rowan happened to be standing at the counter. "Impressive," he said. Maya studied him boldly. "Are you rich?" Lena nearly dropped her scissors. "Maya." "What?" she said. "Rich people dress normal now." Rowan's mouth twitched. "I'm comfortable," he replied. Maya nodded thoughtfully, as if filing the answer away for future investigation. After they left, Lena groaned softly. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," he said. Children usually ask the questions adults are too rehearsed to. That night, after closing up, Lena realized something startling. She had gone an entire day without thinking about Victor. Healing doesn't announce itself either. Sometimes it's simply the absence of pain you expected to feel. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. The return address alone told her it was expensive. Her stomach tightened before she even opened it. Inside lay a cream invitation bordered in silver. Victor Hale requests the honor. She almost stopped reading. Almost. But then a smaller card slipped free. Handwritten. Of course it was. I hope life has been gentle with you, Lena. You're welcome to witness what stability looks like. Her fingers trembled, not with heartbreak anymore, but with something sharper. Memory has a way of reopening doors you thought you'd sealed shut. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after the twins slept, the invitation glowing under the overhead light like a challenge. She should decline, ignore it, protect her peace. Yet the thought of him believing she was still small, still broken, it scratched at her ribs. The next day, Rowan noticed immediately. You're holding that envelope like it insulted your ancestors. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. My ex is getting married. Rowan waited. She handed him the note. His eyes skimmed it once. Then again. That's not an invitation, he said calmly. It's bait. I know. So why does it look like you're considering going? She stared at the work table. Because a part of me wants him to see I survived, she almost said. Instead, she whispered, I don't know if I'm strong enough. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, are you still shrinking for people who tried to erase you? The question landed deep, painfully deep. That evening, Lena pulled her grandmother's cedar box from the closet. The scent of aged wood wrapped around her like an embrace from another lifetime. Inside lay chalk, measuring tape, delicate shears. And at the very bottom, fabric she had saved for years. Gold silk. Too bold for the girl she used to be, but maybe not too bold for the woman she was becoming. The idea came to her all at once. Not revenge. Recognition. She would not attend that wedding as a ghost of someone Victor discarded. She would walk in as undeniable proof that breaking her had been beyond his power. For the next 2 weeks, she barely slept. Patterns covered the floor. Pins clung to the carpet. More than once, she jabbed her finger and sucked in a quiet hiss before continuing. Maya wandered in one night, rubbing her eyes. Mama, why are you still awake? Lena smiled softly. Because sometimes you have to build the moment you deserve. When the gown finally took shape on the mannequin, even she forgot how to breathe. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't begging for approval. It was timeless. Layered gold catching light with every angle, structured yet fluid, strength stitched into every seam. Rowan stopped by the afternoon she finished it. She stepped out wearing it before she could second-guess herself. He went completely still. For the first time since she'd known him, Rowan Cole looked stunned. Lena. She searched his face nervously. Is it too much? He shook his head slowly. No, he said. It's exactly enough. Then, almost as if speaking to himself, they won't know where to look first. She exhaled. You think I should go? I think, he replied gently. You stopped being someone who hides a long time ago. You just haven't caught up to that truth yet. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and mercilessly clear. Her nerves hummed under her skin as she adjusted her earrings. The twins circled her like excited satellites. You look like a queen, Maya declared. A warrior queen, Lila added. Lena laughed softly, though her throat felt tight. Rowan arrived precisely on time. When she opened the door, he took one look at her and said quietly, Ready? She thought about the rain-soaked night she fled her marriage. About the woman who cried over a broken needle. About every moment she nearly gave up. Then she nodded. I am. As they drove toward the cathedral, Rowan spoke without looking at her. There's something I should probably mention before we walk in. Her stomach dipped. Yes. My world is a little public. She frowned slightly. How public? He pulled into a reserved lane where attendants immediately stepped forward. Recognition flashed across their faces. Respect followed. Oh, Lena whispered. He met her gaze then. I wanted you to know me before you knew that part. She studied him. really studied him and understood. All those quiet recommendations, the effortless access, the calm authority. You're wealthy, she said slowly. I'm fortunate, he corrected. Why didn't you tell me? Because the first time you spoke to me, you didn't care who I was, only whether the sleeve was straight. Emotion rose unexpectedly in her chest. Rowan, you built your life without rescue, he continued softly. Don't let anyone rewrite that story. If your heart is already pounding and you can feel the moment building, tap like on this video. It helps this story reach someone who might need it more than we know. The cathedral doors loomed ahead. Lena drew one steady breath, then stepped forward. The attendant pushed the doors open, and the world tilted. Lights spilled across the polished aisle, catching the gold of Lena's gown until it seemed almost alive. Conversations fractured mid-sentence. A fork clinked against crystal somewhere near the front. Then silence swallowed the sound whole. Rowan offered his arm. She took it, not because she needed support, but because partnership felt different from dependence. The first step inside echoed louder than it should have. Then another. Whispers traveled faster than wind. That's his ex-wife. She looks unbelievable. Who was that with her? Rowan didn't scan the room, didn't posture, didn't tighten his jaw. He simply walked beside her like this moment was ordinary, like she was meant to command spaces like this. At the altar, Victor Hale forgot every speech he had rehearsed. His bride, Camille, followed his gaze, confusion flickering into something sharper as she watched the entire room recalibrate around the woman approaching them. Victor leaned toward his best man. Why is she here? The best man whispered back. You invited her. Not like this. Lena saw it then. Not regret. Not nostalgia. Fear. Strange how small a man could look inside an expensive suit. When she reached the seating area, an usher scrambled forward. Ma'am, your seat is. Rowan's voice, calm and low. She'll sit wherever she's comfortable. The usher nodded immediately. Recognition again. Power recognizing power. Lena felt it ripple outward. The subtle shift in how people stood, how they spoke, how their eyes tracked Rowan without appearing obvious about it. She leaned closer. You could have warned me it was like this. I tried, he murmured. She almost smiled. Victor stepped down from the altar before anyone could stop him. Lena, he said, forcing warmth into a voice that sounded suddenly too tight. Up close, she noticed the faint sheen of sweat near his temple. Victor, you look, he searched for a word that didn't hand her victory. Different. I stopped asking permission to exist, she replied gently. The sentence landed between them like a closing door. His gaze flicked to Rowan. And you are? Rowan extended his hand. Rowan Cole. Victor took it automatically, then froze. Understanding detonated behind his eyes. Cole Holdings. Cole Foundation. Cole Capital. The name traveled in circles Victor had spent years trying to enter. You're that Rowan Cole. Rowan tilted his head slightly. I'm just Rowan. Victor laughed too loudly. Well, this is unexpected. Lena studied him calmly. So many years she had watched this man control rooms with ease. Now the room controlled him. Camille approached slowly, her heels clicking with deliberate precision. Victor, she said under her breath, are we starting this ceremony or hosting a reunion? Victor cleared his throat. Camille, this is Lena. My ex-wife, Camille finished, her eyes sweeping over Lena in open assessment. There was no hostility there, only calculation. Then Camille's gaze shifted to Rowan. Recognition struck faster this time. Oh, she said quietly. Rowan nodded politely. The officiant attempted to regain momentum. Please, everyone, take your seats so we may begin. But attention is a wild thing once released. Phones had already begun appearing discreetly. Because something electric was happening, the kind people sense before they understand. As Lena moved toward her seat, Victor caught her wrist. Not hard, but familiar enough to ignite an old reflex in her spine. She looked down at his hand, then back at his face. He released her immediately. Why did you come? He asked quietly. She considered him for a moment. Because you asked me to witness stability. The corner of her mouth lifted faintly. I didn't want to disappoint you. He swallowed. The ceremony began. Or tried to. The officiant spoke about commitment, about partnership, about choosing one person every day. Lena watched Victor as those words floated through the air. Strange. Once upon a time, they would have pierced her. Now they felt like lines from a play she had outgrown. Halfway through the vows, Camille's voice faltered. Not visibly, but Lena saw it. Saw the way Camille's eyes kept drifting toward Victor, then toward Lena, then toward Rowan. A puzzle assembling itself in real time. When it came time for objections, the officiant smiled lightly. If anyone has reason these two should not be joined. A faint laugh moved through the guests. Tradition. Predictable. Safe. But Camille suddenly lifted her hand. Wait. The word cracked through the cathedral. Victor blinked. Camille. She turned fully toward him now. How long were you married? The question was quiet. Deadly quiet. Victor forced a chuckle. That's hardly relevant. How long? 5 years. And you invited her. It was courtesy. Camille studied Lena again. The gown, the composure, the man beside her. Then she asked the question that collapsed whatever remained of Victor's certainty. Do you regret losing her? The air shifted. Victor's mouth opened. Closed. This is not the time. That's interesting. Camille continued evenly. Because it feels exactly like the time. A murmur rolled through the pews. Rowan leaned slightly toward Lena. You okay? She hadn't realized she'd stopped breathing. Yes. And surprisingly, she was. Victor lowered his voice sharply. Camille, we can discuss this later. She shook her head once. No. Later is how women end up surprised. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped back, removed her ring, placed it in Victor's trembling hand. I don't compete with ghosts, she said simply. Gasps scattered like shattered glass. Camille, Victor whispered harshly, don't do this. But she was already turning. Each step down the aisle rang louder than the last. A bridesmaid burst into tears. Someone dropped a program. The cathedral doors opened again and closed behind the woman who had just refused to marry a man she suddenly saw clearly. Victor stood frozen at the altar, ring cutting into his palm. For a second, just one, his eyes found Lena's again. And she saw it. Not love. Not even longing. Recognition. He had misjudged her. Catastrophically. The officiant cleared his throat helplessly. I believe we should take a brief recess. But the ceremony was already over in every way that mattered. Victor descended the steps slowly, like gravity had doubled. Did you plan this? He asked Lena hoarsely. She blinked. Plan what? This humiliation. Her voice stayed gentle. Victor, I didn't do anything. Truth simply arrived before the vows. His composure cracked. You always needed drama. Rowan spoke then, not loud, but unmistakable. Careful. Victor turned. Rowan held his gaze with effortless calm. You invited a woman you underestimated, Rowan continued. Don't blame her, because reality answered. Victor looked around, at the watching guests, the discreet phones, the unraveling optics. You think this is a victory? He snapped at Lena. She tilted her head slightly. No. And she meant it. Because victory suggests a battle. She had stopped fighting him years ago. I came so you could see me, she said softly. Nothing more. And now I do, he muttered bitterly. Yes, she replied. Now you do. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lena reached into her clutch. Victor stiffened, perhaps expecting a speech, a final blow. Instead, she handed him the handwritten note he had sent. I thought you might want this back, she said. He stared at it. The arrogance inked across expensive paper. His own cruelty, returned without commentary. His fingers trembled as he took it. She smiled, not triumphantly, just peacefully. I hope one day you understand that stability isn't something you display. It's something you become. Rowan touched her back lightly. Ready? She looked around the cathedral once more. At the marble, the flowers, the spectacle. None of it intimidated her now. Yes, she said. And together, they walked out. Not chased, not hurried, just finished. Outside, cool air filled her lungs so deeply it almost hurt. Then, applause. Soft at first. A single guest who had followed them out. Then another. Within seconds, a small crowd gathered on the cathedral steps. Not for scandal, for courage. Lena blinked rapidly. I didn't expect this. Rowan smiled faintly. Most people recognize strength when they see it. They just rarely admit how much they need it. Across the street, someone lifted a phone openly now. Recording. By morning, the clip would be everywhere. But Lena didn't know that yet. All she knew was that something heavy had slipped off her shoulders and shattered somewhere far behind her. As they reached the car, she let out a breath that trembled on the way out. It's really over, she whispered. Rowan opened the door for her. It's been over, he said gently. You just honored the ending. Before we step into what happens next, if this moment gave you chills, tap like and subscribe. Stories of rising after being broken deserve to be told again and again. As they drove away, Lena glanced back only once. Not with longing, just acknowledgement. Then she faced forward. By sunrise, the video had escaped into the world. Not leaked. Escaped. Someone had captured the exact moment Camille stepped back from the altar, the stunned silence. Victor's unraveling composure, and the quiet, unshakable way Lena walked out beside Rowan. By mid-morning, it was everywhere. Shared, reposted, analyzed by strangers who spoke about her like they had known her all their lives. Woman attends ex-husband's wedding. What happens next shocks guests. The calmest revenge you'll ever witness. Dignity in heels. Lena discovered it accidentally when Maya burst into the kitchen, tablet clutched in both hands. Mama, you're famous. I am absolutely not famous, Lena laughed, pouring cereal. Mama, Lila whispered wide-eyed. There are millions of views. The spoon slipped from Lena's fingers and clattered into the sink. Millions? Her stomach tightened. Rowan called 30 seconds later. Have you looked outside yet? She walked to the window. A news van idled across the street. Another pulled in behind it. Oh no, don't panic, Rowan said calmly. Attention is loud, but it fades. What matters is what you choose to do with it. I didn't ask for this. No, he agreed. But sometimes visibility finds people who've spent too long being unseen. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Unknown numbers. Interview requests. A morning show producer offering a live segment. She sank into a chair. I just wanted closure. Then take it, Rowan replied. And let the noise orbit around you instead of pulling you in. But the noise didn't stay outside. Orders began arriving within hours. Women from cities she'd never visited. Emails that read, I left my marriage after seeing you walk out of that cathedral. You reminded me I'm allowed to start again. Can you design something for the first job interview I've had in 10 years? Lena pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. I can't keep up, she admitted to Rowan that evening. Then you don't, he said simply. What does that mean? It means you stop thinking like someone trying to survive and start building like someone meant to lead. 3 weeks later, the sign went up. Morrow, Atelier and Design House. She cried quietly after the installers left. Not loud, messy tears. Just a steady stream she didn't bother wiping away. Rowan found her standing there when he stopped by that night. You built it, he said. She shook her head softly. No, I rebuilt me. He studied her a moment. You know, he said, most people chase extraordinary moments. Very few become them. She laughed lightly. Is that your billionaire wisdom talking? He sighed. You promised you wouldn't start treating me differently once you knew. I'm teasing, she smiled. Then, more seriously, why did you help me? Rowan leaned against the window. When my mother left my father, he said quietly. She had $40 and no one willing to bet on her. People confuse wealth with distance, but I know exactly what it looks like when someone refuses to disappear. Emotion warmed Lena's chest. You saw yourself. I saw courage, he corrected gently. The grand opening drew a line down the block. Not because of gossip anymore, but because the work spoke. Structured gowns that felt like armor. Silhouettes that didn't beg approval. Fabric that moved like intention. A journalist asked her during an interview, "What's your design philosophy?" Lena thought for only a second. "I make clothing for the moment a woman remembers who she is." The quote spread almost as fast as the wedding video. 6 months later, orders came from overseas. A year later, a major retailer requested a collaboration. She declined politely. "I'm not scaling at the expense of soul," she told Rowan. He smiled. "You're rarer than you realize." Meanwhile, Victor's empire began cracking in places money couldn't plaster over. Investors grew cautious. Partnerships quietly dissolved. Not because Lena exposed him, she never spoke his name publicly, but because character has a way of revealing itself eventually, especially when people start looking closer. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after the cathedral, Lena stepped into a commercial building for a fabric meeting and saw him. Victor stood near the reception desk, flipping through a folder with tight, economical movements. His suit was still expensive, but something about him looked smaller, less certain. He noticed her almost instantly. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he walked over. "Lena." "Victor." Up close, she saw the faint lines stress had carved into his face. "I heard about your company," he said. "News travels." He nodded. "You always were disciplined." The compliment sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. They stood in silence before he exhaled slowly. "I owe you an apology." She didn't rush to fill the pause. "I confused control with strength," he continued. "And by the time I understood the difference, you were already gone." She studied him, not with bitterness, just clarity. "Pain is a thorough teacher," she said softly. "I underestimated you. You underestimated what happens when someone stops believing your version of them." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "That wedding was the most expensive lesson of my life." She almost smiled. Lessons usually are. He hesitated. "Are you happy?" The question surprised them both. Lena thought of the studio humming with creativity, of Maya arguing passionately about becoming an architect, of Lila, who now wrote stories and taped them proudly to the refrigerator, of Rowan, steady as sunrise. "Yes," she said. "I'm glad," Victor replied quietly. And for the first time, she believed he meant it. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "You were never small, Lena. I just needed you to be." She paused, then answered with the same calm that had once undone him. "I know." That winter, snow softened the city into something almost hushed. Rowan invited her to a small gallery under the pretense of a private exhibit. She should have suspected something. The room glowed with candlelight. No crowd, just her daughters, grinning like they held the universe's best secret. "Mama," Maya whispered loudly, "don't scream." Lila shushed her. Rowan stepped forward, nerves flickering beneath his composure for the first time since she'd known him. "Lena, loving you has been the easiest certainty of my life." Her breath caught. "You didn't rescue me," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "You never needed rescue. But I would like the honor of walking beside you, for whatever comes." When he knelt, the world narrowed to a single shining point. "Yes," she whispered before he could even finish. Their wedding the following spring unfolded beneath an open sky. No spectacle, no performance, just intention. As Lena walked down the aisle, Maya leaned toward Lila. "Mama doesn't look nervous." Lila smiled. She already knows what love feels like now. Rowan took Lena's hands. No fear in either of them, only recognition. Years later, during an interview, a young reporter asked her, "If you could say one thing to the woman you were the night you walked into the rain, what would it be?" Lena smiled softly. "I would tell her that the life waiting ahead is far kinder than the one she's afraid to leave, and that her value was never decided by the person who couldn't see it." She paused, then added, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay where you are tolerated and go where you are celebrated." If this story moved something inside you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe for more stories that remind you of your strength. Like this video so it reaches someone standing at the edge of a hard decision. And in the comments, finish this sentence. I remembered my worth when. Because your voice might be the sign someone else is praying for. Lena would later teach her daughters something simple. Your value does not decrease because someone fails to recognize it. And the best revenge is building a life so full you no longer crave an audience to your healing. Some endings aren't explosions. Some are quiet doors closing behind you as you finally walk toward the light. And sometimes, the woman no one noticed becomes the woman no one forgets.